At my daughter's wedding, I was made to sit at the back of the congregation whilst my wife's ex-husband sat beside her. They said he was the sponsor of the wedding and I didn't fit into the big men. So I calmly left. What happened next shocked everyone. Let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Jerry Main from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. My name's Marcus. I manage property for a living. I deal in tenants, contractors, keys, and locks mostly. I've always liked how simple they are. Turn one way, you're in. Turn the other, you're out. No arguments. No gray areas. For most of my life, I believe people work the same way. You love someone. You show up. You make sacrifices. They remember. But standing at the back of that church, watching my wife's ex-husband sit where I should have been, I realized people don't work like locks. They lie. They shift. And sometimes, they replace you quietly, like swapping out a deadbolt while you're asleep. You ever sit at the back of your own daughter's life? That's what it felt like. Not a wedding. A public sentencing. When I hadn't even known I was on trial for. I wore the same suit I wore to her high school graduation. I'd had it tailored the week before, wool gray, clean lines, something that made me feel like her father. Like I belonged in the front row. But when I arrived, I saw the seating card. Reserved for sponsor family. 3 seats. My wife, her ex-husband, and his new wife. I stood there staring at the names, my own nowhere. My wife glanced back once, caught my eye, and looked away like I was someone from work. Not her husband. Not the man who'd raised her daughter since she was 6. They said he paid for the venue, that he covered the dress, that he flew in some fancy chef from Madrid for the reception. I paid for things too, quietly. The florist, the band, the champagne tower she'd always dreamed of. I never asked for credit. I thought being her father was enough. So I took a seat in the back, next to the sound technician, and watched my daughter walk down the aisle. She didn't look at me. Not once. I kept waiting for it. A smile, a glance, anything. But she walked right past me like I was part of the lighting rig. When they reached the altar, her mother reached over and took her hand, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Her ex-husband nodded proudly. And me? I just sat there, hands folded, heart pounding like I'd swallowed a grenade. After the ceremony, they all spilled into the courtyard for pictures. I wasn't asked to join a single one. Not even the family shot. A stranger tried to take my camera, thought I was the photographer. I didn't correct him. I left before the reception. Calmly, quietly, walked to my car like I was headed to a doctor's appointment. No yelling, no tears, just a strange numbness, like walking underwater. I sat behind the wheel and stared out at the church steps, watching them pose and laugh and sparkle like people I'd never met. Then I pulled out my phone. There's a thing that happens when you stop trying to be chosen. When you stop begging for a place. A clarity. Cold. Clean. The same way a locksmith drills out a jammed lock. You don't argue with it. You don't grieve it. You remove what doesn't work. So I started removing things. The reception venue was under my name. I'd signed the lease 3 months ago. I called the manager, told her to cancel. The deposit was mine. The floral arrangement team? Canceled. The band? Pulled. Catering? Voicemail left. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I simply turned the key. That night, I slept better than I had in months. They called me the next day when they got to the venue and found it locked. No vendors. No music. No food. Just a cold, empty space that cost nothing and said everything. My daughter called 4 times. Then texted once. What happened? Where are you? I blocked her number. Not because I hated her, but because I needed silence. A silence that meant something. One she could feel. 3 days later, I filed for divorce. I told my wife through email. Direct. Respectful. Final. No discussion. Just a scanned PDF and a subject line that said, regarding closure. She tried to call. I didn't pick up. I think that's what hurt her more than anything, not the papers, but the fact that I didn't scream, that I didn't plead. I had always been predictable, forgiving, the quiet one. But silence has a sharp edge when you stop dulling it for other people. I'd been holding on to a fantasy for years that love meant patience, that dignity meant endurance. But I was wrong. Dignity means leaving the room when you're being insulted, even if the whole world's clapping. Dignity means not clapping with them. So I left the applause behind. Later, I found an old photo of us, me, my wife, and my daughter when she was 10. She's on my shoulders, arms spread wide like wings. I looked at my own face in that picture and didn't recognize the man. He looked happy, trusted, chosen. I framed the photo and kept it on my dresser, not to remember them, but to remember myself. Because that day in the church, something shattered. But not me. No, I was already broken. What shattered was the illusion, the polite lie I'd lived under for too long. And once the glass cleared, I saw it all. The way my wife's ex hovered at birthdays, how he was always just helping. The late night calls. The inside jokes. The way my daughter started calling him dad, again 2 years ago, said it was just for fun. I laughed, said it didn't matter. But it did. Of course it did. So I gave them the wedding they deserved, one without me. No father's speech. No toast. No blessing. Just a closed door. A lesson in absence. And if you've never taught someone with your silence, you don't know power yet. Because sometimes, being disrespected isn't the worst part. Being expected to smile through it is. The day after the wedding, I packed my things like a tenant on notice. No fighting. No drama. Just folded shirts and unplugged chargers. I boxed my books, all 37 of them, and left the shared ones on the shelf. I didn't touch the wedding album. Didn't even glance at it. I moved like a ghost in my own home, feet soft on tile, breath held like an intruder. But I wasn't intruding. I was leaving a space that had quietly evicted me years ago. You ever leave a house you helped build and realize it's not yours anymore? That morning, my wife, Sandra, was still at her sister's. Cleaning up the emotional fallout, I assumed. I didn't bother to check. Her phone calls had already slowed from frantic to polite. Like she was starting to understand the new version of me didn't negotiate. My daughter hadn't tried again. I'd blocked her number, not out of cruelty, but clarity. Let her wonder. Let them all sit in the silence they'd created. I was done clarifying my worth to people who only saw me when they needed a check cleared or a hinge fixed. I left my house key on the kitchen island, next to a mug she'd once bought me that read, "Best bonus dad ever." The ceramic was chipped. I noticed it months ago and never said anything. It felt like the right symbol to leave behind, something that used to mean love but was now just broken and easy to forget. I took nothing sentimental with me. Not out of spite, but because nostalgia is a dangerous thing when you've been betrayed. It'll try to convince you it was all worth it. It wasn't. When I arrived at the apartment, it smelled of fresh paint and new carpet. It was smaller than our home, half the square footage, none of the memories. That was the point. I brought in my boxes one by one, lined the shelves with my things like I was reintroducing myself to myself. I hung up only one picture, not a family, of a forest trail I used to hike before marriage rearranged my priorities. It reminded me that peace doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. They say when a man disappears, he either lost everything or found himself. I wasn't sure which category I fell into yet. All I knew was I felt lighter than I had in years. The calls kept coming, not to my phone. Those lines were severed, but through mutual friends, old neighbors, even Sandra's cousin Lyle, who used to come over on Sundays for football and to pretend he didn't notice the tension in our house. He left a voicemail that said, "Marcus, come on, man. You're making a scene." I deleted it. Funny how they call it a scene when you stop playing your part. 3 days in, Sandra finally emailed me. The subject line was "We need to talk." I didn't open it right away. I let it sit there like a package I never ordered. When I did read it, it was everything I expected. Explanations without apology. Phrases like it just made sense for him to sit there, and I didn't think you'd care that much. You ever read a message and feel like someone's daring you to be the villain in their story? That was how it felt. Like she'd already written my role in her head and needed me to perform it to justify her own betrayal. I replied with one sentence. "I'll see you in mediation." That same day, I sent a registered letter to my daughter. No emotion, no rage, just a simple statement. Given recent events, I'm stepping back from this relationship. I wish you peace. That was it. No signature. No fatherly closure. She'd made her choice when she walked past me in that aisle like I was air. I had made mine when I walked out the door and never looked back. The part they never tell you about walking away is how hard it is to stay gone. The first week, I kept catching myself about to text her random things. Don't forget the oil light's been acting up. Tell the plumber the shut-off valve sticks. Father thoughts. Automatic. But I never hit send. That was the test. Not the silence itself, but whether I could stay quiet when I still cared. I thought about that a lot. In that empty apartment, surrounded by my own breath and the hum of the fridge. I thought about what it meant to love someone who no longer saw you as necessary. Whether stepping away was punishment or protection. Maybe both. And then came the moment I hadn't expected. Day 5. I was organizing my paperwork when I found an old college brochure tucked in a folder. My daughter had once wanted to go to a boarding school out east. We'd visited together, her in a hoodie, me trying to act like I wasn't afraid of her growing up too fast. She hadn't gotten in. We never talked about it. But I kept the brochure. Not because of the school. Because of how tightly she'd held my hand during the tour. Like I was the only safe thing in the world. I stared at that brochure for a long time. Thought about burning it. Couldn't do it. Couldn't forget the hand squeeze. So I put it in a drawer. Not to remember her, but to remember who I was when she looked at me like that. Because if I was ever going to rebuild myself from this, I needed to believe that men still existed. There's a strange kind of grief that doesn't show up with tears. It arrives as forgetting, people forgetting what you did, who you were, what you gave. They remember what was flashy, expensive, dramatic. Not what was steady. Not what held the floor up. That's how I knew I was finally seeing things clearly. I was the floor. I'd held the weight. And now that I was gone, they were tripping over the cracks. I spent the next few weeks in a silence that bordered on sacred. My apartment was small, quiet, efficient. I ate the same meals. I read. I walked. I started building furniture again. Something I hadn't done in years. The first piece I made was a simple stool. Oak legs, smooth finish. Took me 5 hours. I didn't need it. I just wanted to remember what it felt like to make something that didn't talk back, didn't lie, didn't betray. You sand the wood, and it stays true. You hammer it wrong, it lets you know. There's honesty in that. Honesty I hadn't felt from another human being in a long time. That's when I started digging. Not out of spite. Out of curiosity. I wanted to know how deep the replacement went, how early the erasure began. I started with old photos. Facebook albums. Posts I hadn't looked at in years. Gradually I saw it. The pattern. My name was tagged less and less. Captions started to say her parents, not my husband and I. Sandra's ex started showing up in places he hadn't been invited. Family barbecues, birthdays, graduation dinners. I remembered arguing about it once. She'd said I was being insecure, that it was for her daughter's sake. I believed her. That was the cost of love, right? You silence your instincts so there's don't feel threatened. I remember the day she stopped calling me babe. It was right after he flew in for our daughter's scholarship dinner. That night, she called him generous. She called me Marcus. That wasn't just a name. That was a reclassification. I didn't rage. I didn't even cry. I just took out a legal pad and started listing every moment I'd rewritten myself to be more tolerable, less reactive, more understanding. I ended up with 4 pages. At the bottom I wrote, "You're not angry. You're awake." The more I pieced it together, the more I realized I hadn't been loved in a long time. I'd been useful. There's a difference. Love holds space for you even when you're not convenient. Utility waits until you're needed, then shelves you when you're not. And I had been shelved. Neatly, quietly, respectfully, but shelved all the same. I went back to work after 10 days. Property inspections, leases, roof repairs. None of it felt meaningful. Not because it wasn't, but because I didn't feel meaningful. I'd spent so long being the dependable one, the fixer, that I didn't know who I was when no one needed fixing. So I started fixing myself. Slowly, boringly, relentlessly. Therapy, journaling, reading. I didn't tell anyone. Some things lose their power the moment you explain them to people who haven't been through it. My therapist, Anna, was sharp. She didn't coddle. Said something the second session that stopped me cold. You can't heal in a story where you're still trying to be the hero for people who cast you as the villain. I wrote that on my fridge. Then came the email from my daughter. It was short, careful, almost like it had been written by a lawyer. Dad, I know you're hurt. I didn't mean to disrespect you. I just thought Mom handled the seeding stuff. I didn't know you were upset until after. I'm sorry if it felt wrong. Can we talk? Jenna, if it felt wrong. The word if was a surgical cut. Not an apology, an insurance policy. But even still, I stared at that email for 20 minutes, trying to feel angry. I couldn't. I felt tired. Tired of being the one who knew what words really meant. Tired of being asked to explain why I bled when they swore they didn't swing the knife. I didn't reply. Instead, I started mentoring my late brother's son, Kyle. 19. Quiet. A little lost. He'd just dropped out of college and was trying to figure out life. I took him to job sites, taught him how to estimate repairs, how to spot water damage. We built a table together, then sold it. He called me uncle, but I knew what was really happening. I was becoming someone's compass again. And this time, it wasn't forced. It wasn't earned through bloodlines or wedding rings. It was chosen. One night, we were packing up tools when Kyle asked, "Do you miss them?" I didn't answer right away. I ran my hand across the smooth edge of the oak slab we built together. "I miss who I thought they were," I finally said, "but not who they turned out to be." That silence afterward? That was healing. Because for the first time, I wasn't waiting to be seen. I wasn't explaining my pain or defending my absence. I was just existing. With clarity. With boundaries. With peace. And in that stillness, I began to understand something vital. They hadn't forgotten me. They just edited me out of the story they preferred to tell. But the thing about editors? They always leave fingerprints. And I was starting to trace every one of them. 2 years is enough time for people to rewrite the past, enough time for the villain to become a ghost, and for the ghost to become an afterthought. I learned that firsthand. I stayed quiet. I built a new life in the slowest, smallest ways. Morning coffee with no chaos. Long walks with no destination. I even started attending a woodworking circle at the community center, 5 retired men and me passing around chisels like confessionals. It didn't fix the wound, but it dulled the ache. And in that quiet, I discovered a truth. People don't apologize when you leave. They apologize when they need you again. Jenna called me on a Tuesday. New number. New tone. "Hi, Dad. I don't know if this is still you, but things have changed, and I could really use your advice." That word Dad hit like glass cracking under slow pressure. Not Marcus. Not silence. Just a thread reaching out into the dark. I didn't answer right away. I let the voicemail sit for 3 days. Not out of spite, but to see if she'd call again. She didn't. That told me she hadn't changed completely. But something had shifted. So I called her back on the 4th day. She answered like she'd been holding her breath. "Hi," she said. Just that. Soft. Careful. Like walking across ice. "Hey," I replied. Calm. Even. Then came the silence. The kind that used to scare her when she was little. Back then, if I didn't answer her questions right away, she'd fill the air with chatter. But this time she didn't. She waited. So I spoke. "You said you needed advice." She exhaled like she hadn't realized she'd been bracing. "Yeah. I think I married the wrong person." The words came out shaky. Then she rushed to clarify. "He's not abusive or anything, just—" "I don't know. He doesn't listen. Doesn't take responsibility. He reminds me of—" She stopped. Didn't say Mom. Didn't say her real father. But the silence finished the sentence for her. I listened. Let her talk. About the mounting credit card debt. The silent dinners. The hollow apologies. I didn't interrupt. Didn't offer comfort. I just let her empty the weight she'd been carrying. And the whole time, I felt this strange ache, not pride, not pity, but something in between. Because she was becoming someone who could finally see beyond the surface. And that sight cost her. When she paused, I said only this: "Marriage is built in the quiet moments, Jenna. If the silence feels like punishment instead of peace, it's not love." She didn't respond at first. Then I heard a sob. Not loud. Just one sharp breath catching in her chest. "I think I messed everything up," she whispered. I didn't tell her she didn't. I didn't rush to erase her guilt. Because truth is, she had messed things up. And growth only comes when we stand in that mess and decide who will be next. We ended the call shortly after. No promises. No reunions. Just a door cracked open, barely enough to step through. A week later, I visited her apartment. She didn't know I was coming. I didn't knock. Just left a brown paper bag on her porch. Inside was a care package, vitamins, a small journal, a jar of homemade soup, and one framed photo. It was from her wedding day. The only picture I'd been in, taken from far away, blurry, accidental. I was standing alone in the back, half in shadow. I'd cropped out the rest. Framed it in walnut I'd carved myself. At the bottom I'd etched 3 words. I was there. That's all I left. She never messaged me about it. But 2 days later, I got a photo back, a picture of that frame sitting on her windowsill. No caption, just the image. She knew what it meant. Meanwhile, Sandra was unraveling. Word got back to me through Kyle. He still lived in the same neighborhood, still talked to people who loved drama more than boundaries. Her new husband had disappeared. Not literally, but emotionally. Took out a business loan in her name, defaulted, then skipped town with someone from his office. She'd lost the house. Moved in with her sister. She was, in every sense of the word, abandoned. She called me a week later. I let it ring once, then picked up. Marcus. That voice. Still smooth. Still rehearsed. But weaker now. Like the foundation had cracked. I didn't call to fight, she said. I just needed to talk to someone who knew the version of me before all this. I didn't say anything. She sighed. He left. I trusted the wrong person. Again. I waited. I know you don't owe me anything, she added quickly. But you were always the calm one. The stable one. There it was again. The reclassification. Stable. Calm. Useful. I spoke only when I was sure my voice wouldn't shake. I was also the one you erased when he became convenient. Silence. You didn't just sit me at the back, Sandra. You let someone else take my place. You watched it happen. Her breath caught. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You just didn't expect me to leave for good. I didn't think you'd walk away. I paused. That's the problem. You thought I wouldn't. I offered her tea. A formality. She declined. We ended the call politely. And when I hung up, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt finished. I'd returned. Not to be welcomed. Not to reclaim what was lost. But to prove something they'd all forgotten. You can't erase a man who built his own foundation. You can only forget what it felt like to be held by it. Some reckonings come with thunder. Others arrive in a whisper, like a door left slightly ajar, or the sound of someone realizing too late they were wrong. I used to think justice was loud, that it needed witnesses. But now I understand the most devastating kind happens in private, where there's no audience to rewrite the memory. Just you, them, and the quiet truth neither of you can dodge anymore. Sandra showed up in person 2 weeks after the call. I knew she would. People like her always come back, not because they've changed, but because their world has. She knocked twice, soft and uncertain, like the past might answer before I did. I opened the door without a word, leaned on the frame, and looked at her the same way I might look at an old chair I once loved, but now couldn't trust to hold weight. She looked thinner. Not sick, just less sure of herself. She held a leather purse like a shield and wore makeup that was starting to sweat off her face. That used to bother her. Today, she didn't even notice. I didn't know where else to go, she said. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, scanning the apartment like she was expecting to see remnants of herself. There were none. She sat on the couch, and I handed her a cup of tea. Not as a gesture of kindness, but to remove excuses. I didn't want her mistaking civility for reconciliation. I know I don't deserve to ask you this, she said, eyes low. But I need help. She didn't cry. Not yet. People like Sandra don't cry until they're sure they've lost control. She still thought she might have a little left. Financial? I asked. She nodded. Yes. And maybe just someone to talk to. You were always good at seeing the big picture. I smiled at that. Not because it was kind, but because it was finally honest. She'd never wanted the big picture before, only the frame that made her look the best inside it. I'm not your safe place anymore, I said. She looked up, blinking hard. You used to be. I nodded. And then you sold that safety for convenience. For a man who bought his way into moments I earned. She flinched at that. Not dramatically. Just enough to show the mask was slipping. I didn't think it would hurt you like that, she said. Then you didn't know me at all. I let the words hang. Not to punish her. To clarify. She shifted in her seat, like the truth made the cushions itch. He said he was just helping. That you didn't mind taking a step back. He was wrong. She exhaled sharply. So was I. We sat in silence. A long one. The kind only two people who've truly disappointed each other can sit through without speaking. Then she asked the question she came to ask. Can we start over? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood up, walked to my cabinet, and pulled out an envelope. I handed it to her. Inside was the signed finalization of our divorce, dated, sealed, and registered. I'd never mailed her a copy. I'd wanted her to feel what it was like to be left wondering. But this was the moment to end it cleanly. She opened the envelope, saw the seal, and froze. This was 2 years ago, she said, voice small. I nodded. You were divorced the moment you stopped protecting me. That's when the tears finally came. Not a performance, not a manipulation, just quiet devastation. The kind that comes when you realize the door you thought would always open has rusted shut. I was selfish, she said, barely audible. I said nothing. Some things are better left without forgiveness. Not because they don't deserve it, but because the absence of it makes the truth last longer. She wiped her face, stood slowly. I guess I thought if I was ever really sorry, that would be enough. Sorry doesn't change what you prioritized when it mattered. She nodded, took one last look around. This place is peaceful. I didn't respond. She didn't deserve to be invited into my peace. She had forfeited that right the moment she chose optics over loyalty. As she left, I noticed her hesitate at the door, one last hope, maybe, that I'd soften, that I'd undo it all with a sigh or a hug or one of those lines people use to make themselves feel better. But I just closed the door gently behind her, and that was the reckoning. Not rage, not revenge. Closure. The next day, I visited Jenna. She'd asked me to meet her for coffee, neutral ground. Public. I think she feared I'd still be too raw to be in private with her. She was early, already seated, hands wrapped around a mug like she needed the heat to stay steady. I got your package, she said quietly. I nodded. I stared at that photo for 10 minutes before I realized where you were standing. You didn't see me that day, I replied. She didn't deny it. I was angry, she admitted. I thought Mom was being generous. I didn't see it for what it was. What do you see now? She took a deep breath. That I traded consistency for charisma. I let someone flashy take credit for things you built slowly. Quietly. I nodded. That's how most fathers disappear. Not by walking out, but by being edited out. She looked down, ashamed. But I didn't come to shame her. I reached into my coat and pulled out the card she wrote when she was 12. You're the only man I'll ever trust. I slid it across the table. Keep it, I said. One day, you'll write your own version of this for someone. Make sure it means something when you do. She started crying. Didn't care who saw. And I didn't try to comfort her. Because sometimes tears are the first honest thing a person says. Peace is a strange thing to carry after you've lived through betrayal. It doesn't feel like joy. It's not relief, either. It's quieter than that. More private. Like a deep breath in a room no one else knows you're in. That's what my life became. Not a story I needed to tell anymore. Just a space I finally didn't have to defend. I don't live in the same apartment anymore. I moved again closer to the edge of town, near the woods, where traffic slows and everything smells like pine after it rains. The new place is small, still, and entirely mine. I built most of the furniture myself. There's a wide bench under the window where the light hits just right around 8 a.m., and that's where I have my coffee now. No phone, no news. Just the quiet hum of a life that doesn't owe anyone an explanation. Jenna visits sometimes. Not often. But when she does, it's different now. No pretense. No performance. She helps me chop vegetables, or she sits on the porch with her feet tucked under her. We don't talk about the wedding, or her mother, or the years in between. We just talk about now, what she's reading, what I'm carving. She asks questions differently now, less out of guilt, more out of curiosity. I can tell she's still repairing the blueprint of what a man is. That takes time. I don't rush her. She once asked if I forgave her. I told her forgiveness isn't always something you say out loud. Sometimes it's the fact that you still make space for someone, that you offer them soup and a safe place to sit. But even that space has rules now. Boundaries. Forgiveness without boundaries is just an invitation to be hurt again. Sandra never came back after that last visit. I heard through Kyle that she moved out of state, closer to her sister. Tried to start over. I don't wish her harm, but I don't miss her either. She was a chapter, one with beautiful sentences and a cruel ending. I reread it sometimes, not to mourn it, but to remind myself how easily we trade truth for comfort. The card Jenna wrote me, "You're the only man I'll ever trust." I still have it, but I don't keep it on my desk anymore. I tucked it away in a drawer, next to a photo of my younger self holding her on my shoulders. Not to relive anything, just to remember who I was before all this. The man who gave freely, who stayed, who listened when no one else did. That man is still here, just quieter now, more careful about where he places his loyalty. Kyle and I still work together sometimes. He's got his own gigs now, young, ambitious, full of ideas. I like watching him figure things out. We built a shed for a retired teacher last month, and when we finished, he said, "You know what your superpower is? You don't flinch when people disappoint you. You just keep going." He's wrong, of course. I flinch. I bleed. I just do it in private now. I think the world teaches us that strength is loud, that it shows up in speeches, slamming doors, revenge plots. But I've learned the opposite. Real strength is walking away without a scene. It's the restraint not to respond to disrespect with more of it. It's the quiet decision to rebuild your life brick by brick, even if no one claps when you're done. The real twist? They still think I was petty for canceling the reception. That's what people remember. Not the years I drove Jenna to school. Not the braces I paid for. Not the nights I stayed up assembling Christmas toys in silence while everyone else slept. Just the moment I decided I wouldn't bankroll my own erasure. That's fine. Let them remember the closed venue. Let them whisper about it like it was vengeance. I know what it really was. It was me choosing not to finance a life I wasn't welcome in. There's a photo on my nightstand now. Not of Jenna, not of Sandra, just a wooden bench in the forest, empty, bathed in morning light. I took it myself on one of my walks. It reminds me that stillness is something you have to choose. Especially after chaos. You don't stumble into peace. You carve it. The best part? No one can take it from me this time. And if you're listening, if you're sitting in the back row of someone else's story, wondering why you're always the one adjusting to be loved, maybe you know the truth, too. Maybe you've lived through the silence. Maybe you've stopped asking to be chosen. If so, then hear me clearly. You are not hard to love. You were just surrounded by people who didn't recognize the worth of quiet loyalty. And maybe the strongest thing you'll ever do is leave without slamming the door. If this story felt real to you, if you've ever been pushed aside by the people you loved most, you're not alone. I share stories like this every day. Real, quiet, powerful. Hit subscribe and stick around. See you soon in the next story.